You ever open an email and know your life just ended? Not in a dramatic, everything goes black kind of way. No. It's worse when it's quiet. When the subject line is cold and empty, formal termination notice. When the sender is someone who once whispered that she believed in you. When the date on the calendar says, "Happy birthday, Carter." Yeah. That's the day she fired me. Let me rewind. I'm Carter Hale. I co-founded Stratus, a tech startup that was supposed to change the way people manage their digital lives. It started in a tiny co-working space with second-hand monitors and vending machine dinners. But within 3 years, we had real investors, a real product, and real press. Everyone wanted in. But the thing no one tells you about success? It makes the wrong people bold. And the ones you trust, dangerous. Before I go further, do me one favor. If you're watching this and you've ever been stabbed in the back by someone you helped succeed, hit that like button. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because I'm about to show you what it really looks like when the person you built a dream with turns around and burns it down. Just to impress someone else. So let's start at the part where it all cracked open. Her name was Tessa Maddox. My co-founder. Head of operations. The people person. The one with the networking charm. We met at an AI conference years ago. She was presenting. I was just attending. But I liked the way she cut through hype with real strategy. We clicked. When I built Stratus, I asked her to be my second in command. She said yes. Said she saw the future in it. In us. She was never supposed to be temporary. But I didn't see the shift when it happened. It started small, meetings without me. Product decisions I found out about after launch. Then she brought in this guy, Chase Radner. Blonde, laugh too loud type. Product strategist, she said. From Elevin. I'd heard of Elevin, flashy, venture burnout startup that tanked after 2 years. But Chase had charm. Investors liked him. Tessa liked him. Too much. At first, I chalked it up to startup life. Late nights, shared pressure, blurry lines. I wasn't naive, just distracted. I was building, coding, fixing bugs, pitching decks. Tessa was supposed to be watching the people side. Instead, she was building her own empire right under my feet. One night, I stayed late at the office to prep for a funding meeting. I walked into the main floor, and there they were, her legs across his lap, laughing over some internal report I hadn't even seen. My gut dropped. They didn't see me. Or didn't care. I backed out. Told myself to deal with it later. Be rational. Be professional. But it was already too late. I started getting locked out of project folders. Meetings moved at the last second. Investors were being briefed without me. And Tessa? She stopped answering my messages unless someone else was CC'd. When I asked for clarity on financials, she said we were evolving into a new structure. Her words, not mine. Then came the email. Carter, per Section 6.1 of our internal equity agreement, your voting rights and operational access have been suspended pending a transition of leadership. There were more words. Legal words. Formal ones. But all I could hear was, she's replacing you. With him. Tessa. My co-founder. My friend. She used the paperwork I created to push me out of my own company. I should have fought. Called lawyers. Made noise. But I didn't. I walked away. Because sometimes, silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. The day I left Stratus, I didn't cry. Didn't rage. I watched her post a champagne boomerang on the Stratus Instagram, clinking glasses with Chase, both of them holding mugs that said, Boss. Cute. The next day, I vanished. I deleted my social accounts. I flew out to an old cabin in Michigan that belonged to my grandfather. No Wi-Fi, no distractions. And I started writing down everything. Every design spec I'd ever worked on. Every user insight. Every flaw I'd fixed. And every shortcut they were now relying on. Because you can fire the builder. But you can't fake the blueprint. Over the next few weeks, I worked quietly. Rebuilding from memory. Reimagining the product I knew better than anyone. Without the politics, the lies, the performance. Just clean code and clarity. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it. But I knew one thing. Tessa and Chase didn't fire me to improve Stratus. They fired me because I made them irrelevant. And they'd just given me the one thing every visionary needs. Freedom. So when I returned, I didn't come back with lawsuits. I came back with something better. Leverage. The email may have fired me, but it also freed me. I went off-grid for 31 days. Not for peace. I wasn't looking for healing. I was looking for a plan. The cabin in northern Michigan was bare bones. A wood stove, a rickety desk, and an internet connection that ran slower than dial-up. But that was the point. No noise. Just me, a stack of notebooks, and the fire burning inside me. Every morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. I ran in the freezing air until my lungs hurt. Then I sat down with coffee, opened a blank page, and started writing code from scratch. No copies. No backups. Just the logic that lived in my bones. The original product I had built Stratus on before Chase's buzzwords and Tessa's brand vision turned it into a shiny Frankenstein. What I was building wasn't revenge. It was insurance. I named it Arcus. Latin for arch, something that holds weight, curves with pressure, but never breaks. Just like me. By day 20, I had the prototype. Simpler than Stratus. Cleaner. More powerful. I focused on privacy features, data transparency, the exact things Stratus quietly buried under vague terms and long privacy pages. I didn't want to match them. I wanted to make them irrelevant. But the code alone wasn't enough. I needed a brand. One built on substance, not spin. I brought in one freelancer I trusted. Jenna, a UX designer who had quietly left Stratus months after I was ousted. She'd worked beside me on the original architecture. She knew the vision. She was also one of the few people who messaged me after I was fired, simply saying, "They'll regret this." Jenna helped create the first mock-ups. The tone, the design, it all felt like coming home. There were no glossy stock images. Just clean, precise messaging, own your data, know your platform, trust your tools. But to make noise in a crowded market, I had to plant the seeds where it hurt the most, recruitment. Stratus had become notorious for long hours, flashy perks, and zero loyalty. People were burning out. I reached out, quietly, to a few engineers I knew were disillusioned. I didn't pitch them a salary. I pitched them freedom. Within a month, 5 had jumped ship. That's when I knew we weren't just building a product. We were building a rebellion. The investor pitch was still tricky. Most VCs didn't care about founder drama. But I made it clear, Stratus was unsustainable. Between legal risks and user fatigue, their infrastructure couldn't hold. One was Marla Danvers, a brutal operator who didn't care about charm. She cared about tech that worked. I showed her Arcus. Real-time demo. Full transparency. I told her how I'd been forced out, how the current Stratus team was building on code they didn't understand. I told her what was coming. Lawsuits over shady data scraping, poor architecture, and a bloated interface that users were starting to hate. Marla nodded once. Then said, "If you're right, you won't need me to knock them down. They'll collapse on their own. But I'll fund you to make sure you're there to replace them when they do." That's all I needed. I didn't run to the press. I didn't blast Tessa online. I got to work. Quietly. Strategically. We launched Arcus 6 months later. No party. No fake hype. Just a tweet. Meet Arcus. Built to protect what Stratus forgot. Trust. And then, I waited. Tessa and Chase laughed it off. Called it a knockoff. Said I was bitter. Said I was chasing clout. But the early users didn't care about gossip. They cared that Arcus worked. Fast. Secure. No buried fees. No tricks. Tech bloggers noticed. Investors noticed. And eventually, users noticed. Within 8 months, Arcus had eaten 20% of Stratus's market. That's when I got the call from their board. Not Tessa. Not Chase. The board. They wanted to talk. Not about a lawsuit. About a buyout. They wanted me to return. With terms. But I didn't want their terms. I wanted theirs. And I had one condition. They both go. Publicly. And permanently. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about cleaning house. The board agreed. Their stock was plummeting. Users were jumping ship. They couldn't afford pride. So the announcement went out, leadership restructuring. They painted it soft. But I made sure the world understood what really happened. I didn't take back Stratus. I absorbed it, dismantled it, and folded what was left into Arcus. The employees had a choice: stay with the future, or cling to a sinking ship. Most chose the former. And those who came along, I gave them ownership. Because that's what Tessa never understood. Loyalty can't be bought, but it can be built. 1 month later, Arcus went public. And I stood alone on that stage. No partners, no shadows, and rang the bell. The past didn't vanish, but it bowed. And sometimes, that's the best ending you can ask for. The thing no one tells you about getting everything you want is how loud the silence feels afterward. I stood in what used to be Chase's office, now mine again, looking out at the same skyline that once represented everything I chased. And yet, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like an echo. The media painted me as a comeback legend. Every headline used the same buzzwords: disgraced founder returns, tech revenge story of the decade, betrayal to boardroom. But those headlines didn't capture what I felt when I turned off the lights each night. Because power doesn't numb betrayal. It only spotlights it. I wasn't chasing Stratus anymore. I had it. I had Arcus too. And I had dismantled the empire that once exiled me. But instead of closure, I kept feeling like the real war hadn't even started yet. The staff at Stratus, now rebranded as part of Arcus Core, looked at me like a mix of myth and threat. Some were relieved, even grateful. Others just waited, wary, wondering if I'd become the tyrant they'd been warned about. But I didn't want control for control's sake. I wanted clarity, order, real accountability. Something Chase and Tessa never believed in. So, I started reviewing everything. Not just financials, but decisions made in the shadows. Memos, legal records, partnership trails, things no one ever thought I'd see again. That's when I found the name. Dareworks. On paper, it was a dormant vendor account. Just a small digital subcontractor hired for data optimization. But the invoices didn't match the output. $500,000 paid out over 18 months, and not a single usable result tied back to it. No clear deliverables. No code attached. But the account was signed off monthly, by Chase. I followed the paper trail further and discovered something worse. Dareworks wasn't just fake. It was a shell company registered under a foreign LLC. And the listed email contact? chase.m.trent@dratech.io. I stared at the screen. This wasn't just betrayal. This was embezzlement. Chase had been siphoning money out of the company while pretending to build something new. And Tessa had either known, or turned a blind eye. I could have gone public that day. Blown the whole story wide open. Taken their reputations from cracked to ashes. But then I thought about what Marla Danvers said when she first funded Arcus. If you're going to be a king, don't waste your time proving it. Just rule better than anyone else ever did. So I made a decision. Instead of leaking it, I brought in my legal team. Quietly. We filed everything. Secured the evidence. Then handed it to the authorities under NDA. I didn't need applause. I needed them out of the system. For good. Weeks passed. Arcus grew. So did scrutiny. Investors wanted to know what we were building next. The media buzzed about how I would reinvent tech leadership. But I still hadn't figured out how to reinvent me. Because despite everything, a part of me still woke up in the middle of the night remembering the moment I was fired. Remembering the smirk on Tessa's face. The silence from Chase. The cold email that ended everything I built. Some scars don't fade. Then came the night Jenna stopped by my office. She didn't knock. Just walked in like she always used to. "You look like a guy who got exactly what he wanted," she said. "I did," I replied. And yet, I didn't answer. She dropped a flash drive on my desk. "These are notes from internal Slack chats, ones I pulled before I left Stratus. You might want to read them." I opened them that night. That's when I found it. A thread, just days before I was fired. Tessa to Chase. If he fights, we spin it. If he stays silent, we win. Chase's reply. He won't fight. He's too proud. He'll disappear. That's what people like him do. They were counting on my silence, betting on my pride. They thought I'd walk away broken, and for a moment they were right. But I came back, not to prove them wrong, but to become undeniable. So the next day, I issued one more public statement. Short, sharp, and calculated. Arcus isn't here to compete with tech giants. We're here to outlive them. Because trust isn't a feature. It's the foundation. That post broke 2 million views in a day. And in my inbox? A message from a blocked sender. I see you haven't changed. Still think winning is enough. Tessa. I stared at it. Then deleted it. Because no, winning wasn't enough. But building something no one could ever take from me again? That was. You'd think ringing the bell at the stock exchange would feel like the finish line. It didn't. It felt like a warning shot. Going public put Arcus on the map, but it also painted a target on my back. Stratus was officially gone, absorbed, stripped of its soul. Chase disappeared into some consulting role no one believed. And Tessa? Last I heard, she was somewhere in Lisbon, posting cryptic Instagram quotes about reinvention and letting go. But the story wasn't over. Because success doesn't clean the blood off your hands, it just hides it better. Arcus was booming. We had grown 60% quarter over quarter. Users trusted us. Engineers finally felt seen. Investors were calling me now, not the other way around. And yet, every day I walked into that glass office, I felt something under the floor. A quiet shift. Like the foundation was humming too loudly. First I blamed stress. Then the whistleblower email came in. It was anonymous. No greeting. No name. Just 2 screenshots and a sentence. You thought you were done with them. You were wrong. The screenshots were from our internal dev environment. Buried inside a recent push was a silent line of code. Malicious. Masked as a data migration script. It would have sent encrypted user metadata to an external server, once per week, undetected. But the domain it was registered to? dwrtech.io. Dare works. The same shell Chase had used to embezzle from Stratus. I didn't sleep that night. I locked down engineering access, pulled in security, and launched an internal audit. Jenna and a few trusted devs worked with me overnight. By 4 a.m., we'd traced the commit back to a new hire. Elliot Rowe. Back-end dev hired 3 months ago. He came highly recommended. Perfect resume. But that's the thing about resumes. They're written to distract. By sunrise, Elliot was gone. Resigned via email. No apology. No explanation. Just gone. But that wasn't the part that broke me. It was what I found in his GitHub profile. A forked repo, private, last updated a week ago. Inside, a full mirror of our core Arcus architecture. The blueprint for the one thing they didn't just want to destroy, they wanted to replicate. This wasn't a one-off hack. It was sabotage. Chase wasn't done. Neither was Tessa. I'd taken back the company, sure. But somewhere out there they were building something else. Something using my code, my design, my vision. I could sue. Again. I could leak it. Again. But that wasn't enough. Because it wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about protection. So I did what I always do when I feel like the floor is crumbling. I started building. Not software this time. A firewall for the soul of Arcus. I called it Spectre, a silent system baked deep into our code, designed to detect anomalies, clones, copycat signatures. It was AI-driven, relentless, and hidden. Not even most of my team knew it existed. Because Arcus wasn't just a platform now. It was a war zone. And I was done playing defense. Still, I couldn't shake the image of Chase, somewhere in the world, laughing behind a screen, thinking he was still in the game. Thinking he could take one more shot and vanish. So I started digging. Used every contact I had, security firms, data brokers, old-school hackers with cleaner records than ethics. I wanted to know where they were, what they were building, and more importantly, Who was helping them? One name came up. Lana Miles. She used to be a PR fixer, the kind you pay when your billionaire CEO tweets something that tanks your stock. But now she was working with stealth startups, vapor companies, ghost founders, and according to one source, she was helping someone pitch a decentralized trust platform in Berlin. Sounded a lot like Arcus. Only uglier. If Chase was the snake, Lana was the skin he shed every time he needed to disappear. I booked a flight. No team. No press. Just me and a copy of the NDA I forced the board to sign the day they handed me back the reins. This wasn't just about stopping a threat. It was about making sure the next version of them never surfaced again. Because I wasn't going to spend my life defending what I built. I was going to make it so bulletproof that betrayal itself couldn't crack it. They say once you win, the war ends. It doesn't. It just changes shape. The moment Arcus went public, I became a symbol. Not just to my team, not just to the media, to people I didn't even know. Disruptors, founders, exiles, even strangers from other industries started messaging me. Some called me the comeback guy. Others, the one who survived the fire. They didn't know the half of it. Because behind every success story, there's a quiet cost. Mine had names, friends I lost, health I ignored, relationships I burned for the chance to stand where I stood. And now that I was finally breathing again, finally in control, something still felt off. It started subtly. A few strange requests in the company system. IPs from Europe pinging our beta environment. Then, one morning, I walked into the office and Jenna met me with a tight face and a post-it. 2 words. Berlin. Lana. It didn't take much to connect the dots. Lana Miles, PR ghost, master manipulator, the one who helped Tessa and Chase stay afloat after the straightest crash. Word on the street was that she was behind a new stealth startup, not just funding it but engineering it from the inside out. The kicker? The name was Lucent. Clean logo. Vague mission statement about ethical ecosystems. But the moment I saw the UI mock-up in their pitch deck, I knew. It was Arcus. Not copy-pasted, but bent, repainted, and rebranded. They were trying to beat me at my own game. Again. I flew to Berlin. Not to cause a scene. Just to watch. Lucent was pitching at a closed-door startup summit. One that required invitation. I didn't have one. But when you've built 2 unicorns and dismantled a scandal in public view, people owe you favors. I got in. Lana was there, front row. Smiling like a viper. She wasn't on stage, but her fingerprints were all over the slides. The speaker? A clean-cut guy named Theo Renner. Harvard grad. Fake warm. He spoke like a TED Talk and moved like a puppet. But when he showed the trust transparency map, and used the phrase data vaulting architecture, I nearly laughed. He didn't write that code. I did. They'd taken pieces of my early Arcus white paper, the one I never published, just drafted, and rebuilt them. Modified just enough to slip under legal radar. When the lights went down, I walked straight up to Lana. She didn't flinch. I heard you were in Lisbon, I said. She smirked. You should know better than anyone, Carter. We never really go away. We just rebrand. I stared at her. You think this ends differently than the last time? I don't think it ends at all, she said. You win. Then someone else comes. Maybe me. Maybe someone smarter. That's how this works. No one stays on top. She walked away before I could respond. And for once, I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Because I had already planned for this. Arcus had a system called Spectre, a behind-the-scenes detection layer built to identify intellectual theft, infrastructure mirroring, even linguistic duplication. It wasn't public. It was embedded deep in our back end, learning constantly. And Lana had just triggered it. Back in New York, I activated Spectre manually. Within 72 hours, it returned 3 matches. Lucent had lifted not just our interface style and language, but actual code strings, core security logic. That meant they either breached us, or someone on my former team had flipped. We traced the leak to a dev named Mark, contracted briefly during our beta phase. We never onboarded him fully. But he had cloned one of our early frameworks to use in freelance tests, and forgotten to wipe the Git trail. Lucent bought it, used it, and that was enough. I didn't call the press. I called Marla. She set up a legal hammer so heavy, Lucent's funding dried up within a week. They tried to pivot, announced a pause in product development, and quietly took down their website. Theo went silent. Lana vanished again. This time, I didn't chase. Because the point wasn't to humiliate them. The point was to outlast them. That's what Arcus was built for. Not a moment, a movement, and people were starting to believe in it. A month later, we hit 1 million users. Then came the letters. Not cease and desists. Thank you letters. From college students. From whistleblowers. From small businesses tired of getting milked by bloated platforms. They trusted Arcus. They trusted me. Not because I was flawless, but because I was transparent. And that was the one thing Tessa, Chase, Lana, all of them, never understood. You can't fake trust. You can't market your way into legacy. You earn it. And sometimes, you fight like hell to keep it. Some stories don't end with fireworks. Some end with silence, the kind that echoes louder than applause. Arcus had made it. Not just survived, thrived. 1 million users. A clean legal record. Investor confidence. And most of all, a loyal team. I should have felt invincible. But one night, after the last board meeting of the quarter, I sat alone in the office. Lights low, skyline flickering beyond the glass. And I realized, I didn't know who I was if I wasn't fighting someone. Tessa, Chase, Lana, even the shadow of Stratus. All gone. The war was over. And in that quiet, it hit me. I had no idea how to be still. Jenna walked in around midnight, carrying 2 coffees. She didn't say anything. Just handed me one, sat beside me on the conference room table, and stared at the city like it held the answers. You ever feel like this was never about them? She asked. I looked at her. I think, I said, it was always about proving I wasn't replaceable. She nodded, like she already knew. We sat in silence. For once, no next move. No pitch to prepare. No lawsuit looming. Just air. That weekend, I booked a solo flight to Alaska. No laptop. No signal. Just trees and snow and a notebook I never opened. Because I needed to stop building for survival. I needed to learn how to live again. I stayed up there longer than I planned. It started as a weekend. Turned into 2 weeks. Then a month. I chopped wood. Learned to cook on a cast iron stove. I even built a small greenhouse from scraps I found in the nearby town's dump. The locals called me the city guy with too many notebooks. I never corrected them. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't correcting anything. I was just existing. When I came back, Arcus was still standing. Thriving, even. Jenna had overseen the new partnerships. Marla had secured a distribution deal with a privacy-first hardware company in Finland. Our user base was doubling every 3 months. And the best part? They didn't call me once. Not because they didn't need me, but because I had built something that could breathe without me. It didn't need me anymore. And maybe, that was the point. 6 months after our IPO anniversary, I walked into the boardroom, handed in my resignation, and smiled. I'm not stepping down, I said. I'm stepping forward. They looked confused. I clarified, it's time Arcus became bigger than me. Time someone else took it further than I ever could. They asked who I had in mind. Jenna, I said. There was no debate. She became CEO 2 weeks later. And me? I left New York. Quietly. No headlines. Just one small goodbye dinner with the original Arcus team, where we didn't toast money or milestones. We toasted freedom. I moved to the coast. Oregon. A small house near the water with a porch and a dog named Archer, a mutt I rescued on a whim and now can't imagine living without. I still own part of Arcus. I still consult on product decisions once a quarter. But the difference is, I no longer need it. The story ended the day I walked away with peace, not power. That's how I knew I won. But sometimes, Echoes return. Last month, I received a handwritten letter. No return address. Just a neat script in one sentence. You were always more than what we let you be. No name. But I didn't need one. I folded it, tucked it away. Some ghosts don't haunt to hurt. Some just want to be remembered. A week later, I ran into someone I hadn't seen since Stratus's earliest days. Kira, the first intern I ever mentored. She was at a coffee shop in Portland, pitching her own startup idea to a group of angel investors. I waited until she was done, then walked up to say hello. She gasped when she saw me. "You're Carter Hale," she said. "You're the reason I even believed I could do this." And for the first time in my life, I didn't deflect, didn't minimize. I just smiled and said, "You already had it in you. I just reminded you." We sat for hours. Not as mentor and intern. Just two builders. Dreamers. Survivors of the corporate storm. And that's the last thing I'll say, if you've followed this far. Burnout doesn't make you weak. Failure doesn't define you. And revenge? It's a waste. But redemption is earned. Brick by brick. Line by line. Choice by choice. I didn't rebuild Stratus. I rebuilt myself. And maybe, just maybe, you can too. White heavy checkmark like the video if Carter's story hit something real. Bell subscribe and turn on notifications for more true, raw, and human stories. Speech balloon and tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were Carter Hale? Thanks for being part of this journey.